My name is Selena, and I'm 33 years old. I've been a music teacher for over a decade, but music has been my heartbeat since childhood. My grandmother, Evelyn, taught me how to play when I was 6. I remember her wrinkled hands guiding mine across the keys, whispering, "Every note you play carries your soul, darling. Never play without feeling." She was my mentor, my best friend, and the only person who truly understood what music meant to me. When I turned 18, she gifted me her most prized possession, a baby grand piano. It wasn't just an instrument, it was a part of her. She had played it through heartbreak, through loss, through joy. It had heard every secret she couldn't say aloud. When she gave it to me, she said, "This piano belongs to the woman who plays with heart, not ego. Take care of her." And I did. For 15 years, that piano sat in my living room like a living presence. Its wood was aged but gleaming, its keys slightly worn but perfectly in tune. It became the rhythm of my home. Whenever life overwhelmed me, when work was stressful, when love failed, when the world felt too loud, I'd sit at that piano and play until my breathing steadied. My students would often joke that I treated that piano like a person. And in a way, they were right. That piano carried my grandmother's spirit, her warmth, her wisdom. But my family never understood that bond. My older brother, Troy, was the pragmatic one, the type who saw everything in dollars and cents. His wife, Nadine, was worse. She had an eye for profit and a tongue sharp enough to slice through anything sentimental. My younger sister, Lara, was gentle and kind, but too afraid to challenge Troy's authority. Together, they often teased me for being too emotional, for living in the past, and for hoarding useless junk. After Grandma passed away, her estate was split evenly among us 3 siblings. There was money, a few properties, and, of course, her personal belongings. She left the piano specifically to me. There was even a handwritten note attached saying, "For Selena, may her heart always play with truth." I remember crying when I read that note. It wasn't about inheritance, it was about legacy. Troy rolled his eyes at the time, muttering something about old people and their drama. Nadine, ever the opportunist, said, "Well, at least you got something that won't collect dust in a bank." I let their comments slide because I thought deep down they respected Grandma's wishes. I was wrong. A few months later, I got invited to a 2-week seminar in Chicago, an incredible opportunity for my career. I hesitated at first, but Lara encouraged me to go. "You deserve it, Selena," she said. "You've worked so hard." So I went. I trusted my family completely. Before leaving, I asked Troy to look after the house, just to make sure the mail didn't pile up and the plants didn't die. He agreed easily. "Of course, sis. What are big brothers for?" Those 2 weeks went by quickly, filled with music, learning, and inspiration. But when I returned home, I noticed something off the second I stepped inside. The house felt empty. Not physically, but emotionally hollow. It's hard to explain unless you've lost something precious. The air felt different, colder. Then I saw the space where my piano had always been. The wall looked naked, the floor too open, my chest tightened. For a second, I thought maybe they'd moved it for cleaning or repairs, but when I called out, Troy and Nadine came from the kitchen looking almost proud. "Oh, Selena, you're back early," Nadine said, her voice overly sweet. "Where's my piano?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Troy didn't even look ashamed. "We sold it." My stomach dropped. "You what?" He shrugged like it was no big deal. "Relax, it was just sitting there. You weren't even using it lately. We figured it'd be better to put the money to use, help pay off some family expenses." I could barely breathe. "You had no right." Nadine crossed her arms. "Come on, Selena, it was just an old piano. You're acting like we burned down your house." I stared at her, stunned by her cruelty. That piano wasn't just old furniture. It was a piece of my grandmother, a piece of me. "I don't believe you," I whispered, tears burning in my eyes. "You didn't even ask me." Troy sighed like I was being unreasonable. "You're too attached to material things, Selena. It's not healthy. Material things. That's what he called it. The piano that had been my grandmother's heart, my comfort, my history. They sold it for quick cash and didn't even have the decency to tell me until after it was gone. I walked over to the empty corner, my fingers trembling as they brushed the air where the piano once stood. The faint outline in the carpet mocked me. I could almost hear the echo of the last note I'd played before leaving. I turned to them slowly. How much? Troy hesitated. Does it matter? It does now, he finally muttered. $3,000. $3,000. They'd sold my grandmother's baby grand piano, a priceless heirloom, for the cost of a used car. I said nothing more. I didn't cry in front of them. I just nodded, turned around, and walked out. Outside, the cool air hit me like a slap, and I let the tears fall freely. That night, I sat in my car for hours, staring at the stars, feeling something inside me crack, not from loss but from betrayal. And that's when I decided, if they could sell my legacy, I could sell theirs. They expected me to thank them for selling my soul. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room, staring at the hollow space where the piano used to be. The silence was unbearable. I could still picture my grandmother's hands gliding over those keys, her gentle humming filling the air. Now, all I could hear was the faint ticking of the clock, a cruel reminder that something beautiful had been erased by greed. By morning, my anger had hardened into resolve. I wasn't going to let this go. I called Troy and demanded an explanation. One that didn't involve cheap excuses or self-justification. Instead, he invited me to a family meeting at his house that evening. His tone was casual, as if we were just catching up over dinner. I could already sense he planned to twist the situation into something noble, to make himself the hero of his own theft. When I arrived, Nadine was setting the table with an almost performative grace. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were smug. "Glad you came, Selena," she said, pouring me a glass of water. "We really need to talk about all this drama." Drama, that's what she called it. Lara was already there, sitting quietly at the far end of the table, her hands clasped tightly. She looked uncomfortable, like she wanted to be anywhere but here. I gave her a small, reassuring nod. Troy cleared his throat, adopting his leader of the family voice. "All right, let's clear the air. We know you're upset about the piano, Selena, but Nadine and I made a decision that benefits everyone. You've always been emotional about that thing, but we had to be practical." I stared at him in disbelief. "Practical? You mean stealing what isn't yours?" Nadine chuckled softly. "Come on, Selena. Don't use words like stealing. It sounds dramatic. You left town, the house was full of unused stuff, and the piano was taking up space. We found a buyer who truly appreciated it." My fists clenched under the table. "You mean someone who appreciated it enough to hand you $3,000? Troy's jaw tightened. "You make it sound dirty. Look, we needed to cover some family expenses, the property taxes, the repairs on Grandma's lake cabin, the cabin we agreed to sell months ago," I interrupted sharply. "So why were there still repairs?" He shot me a warning look. "You don't understand the numbers, Selena. That's my area." I laughed bitterly. "No. What I understand is respect, and you don't have any." Lara finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Troy, maybe you should have told her first. Grandma did leave it specifically to Selena." Nadine waved her hand dismissively. "That letter wasn't part of the legal will, Lara. It was just sentiment. You know how old people get rambling about emotional stuff. The actual will divided everything equally." I turned to her slowly, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "Do you even hear yourself? You're talking about Grandma like she was an inconvenience. She gave me that piano because she trusted me to protect what she loved most." Nadine rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, it's just an instrument. You're acting like it's some kind of sacred relic." I stood up. It was sacred to her, to me. That piano was her legacy. She played it when she lost Grandpa. She played it every Christmas, every birthday, every moment that mattered. You don't sell history for pocket change. Troy raised his voice slightly. Enough. You can't keep holding on to things forever. You have to move on, Selena. Grandma's gone. It's time to live in the present. His words struck me harder than I expected. Move on. As if love and memory had expiration dates. I looked around the room at my brother, who had once carried me on his shoulders as a kid, at Nadine, who had once pretended to be part of our family, and at Lara, whose eyes were filled with quiet apology. For a moment, I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make them feel even a fraction of my loss. But then a strange calm came over me. I sat back down slowly and smiled. You're right, Troy. Maybe I do need to move on. He relaxed slightly, misreading my tone. Good. I'm glad you're seeing reason. Oh, I see reason perfectly, I replied softly. And I also see greed. But you're right, it's time I move on. Thank you for the clarity. Nadine raised an eyebrow, clearly uncertain now. So, you're not mad anymore? Oh, I'm past mad, I said. I'm inspired. There was a long silence. Even Lara looked confused. I stood, smoothing out my blouse. You've made your choices, and I'll make mine. Just remember, Grandma always said, everything done in darkness eventually comes to light. Troy sighed impatiently. Selena, you're making this bigger than it is. Let's not turn this into a family feud. I walked to the door and turned back, my voice steady. Oh, Troy. It's already bigger than you think. As I left, I heard Nadine mutter. What's her problem? It's not like she can get it back. The night air outside was cool and sharp. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I walked to my car. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing. They thought I'd cry, maybe yell, then eventually get over it. They thought they could take something sacred from me and that I'd just swallow the pain because I was too soft. But they'd forgotten who raised me. My grandmother wasn't just a pianist, she was a strategist. A woman who believed that truth, when wielded correctly, could destroy lies without ever raising a hand. That night, I made a silent promise to her memory. I wasn't going to fight them with anger. I was going to fight them with intelligence. I would learn exactly what strings they'd pulled and I'd pull them right back until the whole thing unraveled. As I drove home, my hands trembled not from fear, but anticipation. They had played me for a fool, but I was done being quiet. I left that table with a fake smile, and a very real plan for revenge. Grandma Evelyn was wiser than any of them realized. After that dinner, I didn't speak to Troy or Nadine for a week. Every time my phone buzzed, I ignored it. I couldn't bear to hear their justifications or fake apologies. My house still felt empty, and the quietness where the piano once stood gnawed at me like a constant echo of betrayal. But one morning, as I sat sipping cold coffee and staring at that empty space again, a memory came back to me, a faint image of my grandmother smiling as she tucked away a stack of envelopes inside her cedar chest. It was her favorite piece of furniture, carved from old oak, always smelling faintly of lavender. I suddenly remembered something she said years ago. The truth always has a home, Selena. You just have to know where to look for it. I pushed back my chair and went into the storage room where that very cedar chest sat, covered with an old quilt. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were the usual keepsakes, her embroidered scarves, a small jewelry box, and several neatly bound envelopes. But one in particular stood out. It was sealed with red wax, and in her careful cursive, the front read, "Private for executor only." My breath caught. Executor? I whispered to myself. Grandma had never told us who her estate's executor was. I gently broke the seal and unfolded the first page. It wasn't the official will, I had already seen that one after her death, but this was something else. A letter, written to her attorney, Mr. Colton Reeves. Her words were steady, deliberate, full of the same quiet authority she'd always carried. Colton, I trust you to honor this addendum only if my possessions are mishandled or sold without consent. My grandchildren mean well, but greed is a disease that creeps into even the kindest hearts. Should they ever disrespect the legacy of my home or sell what was not theirs to sell, I wish for the conditional version of my will to take effect. My hands tightened around the letter as I kept reading. The next lines made my heart skip. The piano especially is sacred. It must remain with Selina for as long as she lives. If it is sold or destroyed, consider that a breach of legacy. There it was, my proof that Grandma had known. Somehow, she'd sensed this betrayal long before it ever happened. I didn't waste a second. I found the number for Mr. Reeves' law office, which was still listed under her papers. When his secretary answered, I introduced myself. Tell Mr. Reeves that this is Selina Bennett, Evelyn's granddaughter. It's urgent. He called me back that afternoon. His voice calm but curious. Miss Bennett. I haven't heard that name in a while. Your grandmother was one of my favorite clients. How can I help? I took a deep breath and told him everything, the piano, the sale, the letter I'd found. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, and then he said, Miss Bennett, what you've just described might have serious implications. He explained that the will Grandma left us, the one already processed, was what he called the primary will. But what I'd found was a conditional codicil, a legally binding amendment that would override the primary will if specific circumstances were met. Your grandmother was meticulous, he continued. She had me prepare both versions because she feared her wishes wouldn't be respected. If the piano was indeed sold without your consent, then her alternate will may become the active one. My heart raced. Does that mean the estate could be redistributed? Yes, he said simply. But you'll need evidence proof that the sale occurred against her wishes and without your authorization. Bank receipts, communication records, anything that establishes intent. Intent, I almost laughed. Troy and Nadine had been proud of what they did. They left enough evidence without even realizing it. I told him I had the text messages Troy sent me bragging about selling that oversized antique and a voicemail where he literally said, "You should thank us for taking care of that burden." Mr. Reeves paused, then said something that sent a chill down my spine. Selina, if this is as clear as it sounds, then the consequences for your brother and sister-in-law could be severe. You might want to prepare yourself. I already am, I whispered. He asked me to bring all the evidence to his office the next morning. I barely slept that night, combing through every message, every document, every trace of their arrogance. I printed everything and placed it neatly in a folder labeled Truth. When I arrived at Mr. Reeves's office, he looked exactly as I remembered from my childhood: sharp suit, silver hair, and a patient gaze that could cut through any lie. He examined every piece of evidence quietly, occasionally nodding. When I handed him Grandma's sealed letter, his eyebrows lifted. She really did it, he murmured. I thought she might change her mind, but she followed through. This letter activates the conditional will. He opened a file drawer and pulled out a second binder, the alternate will. He slid it toward me and said, Your grandmother's final wishes were very clear. If her legacy was tampered with, the distribution of her estate changes entirely. I hesitated. Changes how? Mr. Reeves looked me straight in the eye. Everything, the money, the properties, the trusts, goes to you. You become the sole heir. For a long moment I couldn't speak. I felt dizzy, torn between disbelief and a deep, simmering satisfaction. So, all because they sold her piano? He smiled faintly. Because they sold her trust. The piano was just the proof. He told me he would begin filing the necessary legal motions immediately, but advised me not to inform Troy or Nadine yet. Let the system do its work quietly, he said. Justice, when it comes unexpectedly, makes the deepest impact. I thanked him and walked out into the crisp afternoon air. The city felt different, clearer, sharper, alive with possibility. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt Grandma's presence not in sorrow but in strength. As I drove home, I whispered to the empty seat beside me, You always were one step ahead, weren't you, Grandma? When I got home, I stood in front of the empty space again, but this time, I didn't feel hollow. I felt empowered. That void had become the starting point of something much larger, a reckoning. They thought they'd silenced her music, but they'd only set the stage for my revenge to begin. The more I uncovered, the dirtier it got. The morning after meeting with Mr. Reeves, I woke up with a fire in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since the piano was taken, I wasn't weighed down by grief. I was driven by purpose. What started as heartbreak was quickly turning into strategy. I knew my brother well enough to understand one thing: Troy never did anything without an ulterior motive. Selling my piano for the family's good was only the surface of a much deeper problem. If Grandma had been smart enough to create a backup will, she must have known something about Troy and Nadine that I hadn't seen clearly before. That day, I began my quiet investigation. I didn't tell Lara what I was doing, not yet. She had a kind heart, but her loyalty to Troy ran deep. If I wanted the truth, I needed to find it alone. I started by reviewing the bank transactions tied to Grandma's estate. I had access to partial records since each of us was a co-beneficiary. What I found made my stomach twist. There were multiple withdrawals labeled estate maintenance and property upkeep totaling nearly $60,000. The problem? None of the properties required repairs. Grandma's lake cabin had been unoccupied for over 2 years, and the main house where I lived hadn't needed a cent of maintenance. When I traced those expenses back, they led to a new bank account under Troy's name. Not a joint family account, his personal one. I remember whispering to myself, "You didn't just steal my piano, did you?" The more I looked, the more inconsistencies appeared. Tax adjustments, fake invoices, donations that mysteriously matched the registration payments for Nadine's boutique. They'd been funneling money out of the estate under false pretenses for months, maybe years. That evening, I sat at my dining table, surrounded by papers and receipts. My grandmother's handwriting peeked out from her old letters, reminding me why I was doing this. I wasn't just protecting an inheritance, I was defending her memory. When Lara called to check in, I almost ignored the phone, but something told me to answer. Her voice was hesitant. "Selena, can I come over? I think I need to tell you something." She arrived half an hour later, looking anxious, her eyes darting to the piles of paperwork spread across my table. "You're investigating them, aren't you?" she asked quietly. I met her gaze and didn't deny it. "I'm finding out the truth." She nodded slowly, then exhaled. "You're not wrong to. I think there's something you should see." From her bag, she pulled out a folder of signed documents. "Troy asked me to sign these after Grandma died. He said they were tax waivers. I didn't really read them, I just trusted him. But now," her voice cracked, "now I'm not so sure." I looked through the pages carefully. They weren't tax forms, they were authorization documents giving Troy and Nadine full control over certain estate accounts. Lara's signature was there, along with Troy's and Nadine's, but the dates didn't match the day she'd told me she'd signed. They'd forged the filing dates to make it look legitimate. My blood ran cold. "Lara, this is fraud. Actual, legal fraud." Her eyes widened. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I believe you. But we can't go to them with this, they'll just lie or destroy evidence. I'm working with Grandma's lawyer now. Let me handle it." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I just wanted to do the right thing. After she left, I scanned and cataloged every piece of information I had. I created digital copies, saved them to multiple drives, and sent one to Mr. Reeves with the subject line, "New Findings Fraud Evidence." By the next morning, he called me personally. "Selena," he said, his voice calm but deliberate, "you've stumbled onto something serious. These documents could invalidate not just the estate distribution but also open them up to criminal charges." I sat back, heart pounding. "So they could actually go to jail?" "It depends," he said carefully. "But if the evidence is solid, yes. You're not just dealing with greed anymore, you're dealing with fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of trust funds." For a moment, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted justice, no, revenge. Another part of me still couldn't believe that the same brother who used to tuck me in at night had become capable of something this cruel. But as the image of that empty piano space flashed in my mind, my heart hardened again. Mr. Reeves assured me he would begin the formal petition to activate the conditional will within the next few days. But, Selena, he added gently, you need to be careful. If they catch wind of this, they may try to manipulate you or worse, hide evidence. Play along for now. That night, I followed his advice. I called Troy for the first time since the family meeting. My voice was light, friendly, an actress slipping into character. Hey, I said. I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe I did overreact about the piano. I could almost hear the smirk in his tone. I'm glad. You're coming around, sis. We did what we had to do. Family first, right? Right. I lied smoothly. Family first. When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the dark window. I barely recognized the woman looking back. She wasn't the same soft, forgiving Selena who once avoided conflict. She was colder now. Smarter. Over the next week, I quietly dug deeper looking through old financial reports, tracing property filings, and saving screenshots of every inconsistency. Every clue felt like uncovering a note in a twisted symphony that Troy and Nadine had been composing for years, a symphony of lies, greed, and betrayal. But I wasn't just listening anymore. I was rewriting the ending. By the end of that week, I'd gathered enough evidence to not only prove they'd stolen from Grandma's estate, but that they'd done it deliberately. They hadn't made a mistake. They'd made a choice. As I stood by the window that night, the moonlight reflecting off the empty floor where the piano once stood, I whispered, "You were right, Grandma. The truth really does have a home. And it wasn't buried anymore." And now I wasn't just avenging my piano, I was exposing a crime. The law moves slowly, but vengeance has perfect timing. When I walked into Mr. Reeves's office the following Monday, the air felt different, charged, expectant. His assistant ushered me in right away, and he stood from behind his desk, his expression grim but satisfied. "Selena," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "I've reviewed every document you sent. You've done meticulous work." He motioned for me to sit, then closed the blinds and lowered his voice. "I spoke with the probate court early this morning. Given the evidence of fraudulent activity, they've granted us a preliminary hearing to consider activating the conditional will." For a second, I just sat there, trying to process it. "That fast?" He nodded. "The court takes estate fraud seriously, especially when the original beneficiary's property has been unlawfully sold. The judge has agreed to review the case next month. If everything goes in our favor, the conditional will replaces the existing one immediately." I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. The plan that had once lived only in my thoughts, my whispered promise of revenge, was becoming real. Mr. Reeves adjusted his glasses and continued, "Your grandmother's foresight is remarkable. This addendum isn't just a few words, it's a full legal document detailing her moral expectations." She outlined, in specific terms, what constituted betrayal of legacy. The piano sale alone qualifies, but coupled with their misappropriation of funds. He leaned back, letting out a slow breath. "It's irrefutable." I swallowed hard. He clasped his hands on the desk. "It changes everything. You become the sole inheritor of your grandmother's estate properties, savings, trust accounts, everything. Your siblings' shares will be revoked immediately, pending final audit. In short, you'll hold complete control." The words hung in the air like a quiet chord, powerful, deliberate, and just. I should have felt victorious, but there was something bittersweet about it. I didn't want wealth. I didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. I just wanted respect, acknowledgement that what they'd done was wrong. Still, there was a grim satisfaction in knowing that justice had found its rhythm. Mr. Reeves opened a drawer and took out a slim folder. "You'll want to keep this private," he said. "It's the full conditional will. Read it carefully, but don't discuss it with anyone until the court hearing. Not even your sister." I hesitated. Not even Lara? He sighed softly. Not yet. She seems sincere, but she's still emotionally attached to your brother. The less anyone knows, the better. We don't want them tampering with evidence or you. His tone carried weight, a quiet warning. For the first time, I realized the full scope of what I was doing. This wasn't just a personal family dispute anymore, it was a legal storm, and I was standing directly in its eye. As I left his office, folder in hand, I felt something shift inside me. The grief that had haunted me since the piano's disappearance began to transform into something sharper, a composed kind of strength. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind. Music isn't just beauty, Selena. It's discipline, precision, and control. She had been training me for this long before I ever knew it. That evening, I spread the documents out on my dining table. The conditional will was beautifully written, clear, detailed, unambiguous. Grandma had thought of everything. There were even handwritten notes in the margins, reminders of her personality shining through the legal jargon. If greed outweighs love, let love reclaim what's lost. Family can fracture, but truth mends what greed breaks. I traced her handwriting with my finger, tears stinging my eyes. You knew, didn't you, Grandma? I whispered. You knew they'd betray your trust. Just as I was closing the folder, my phone buzzed. A text from Troy. Troy, hey, you've been quiet. We should talk. Nadine feels bad about the piano thing. Dinner tomorrow? I stared at the message for a long time, a small smile curling at the corner of my lips. Bad? They felt bad? That was the best they could do? I typed back, sure. Tomorrow works. When I met them at the local bistro the next evening, they greeted me as if nothing had happened. Nadine wore her usual polished smile, and Troy looked almost cheerful. They were so convinced they had control that it was almost amusing. Glad you came, Troy said, sipping his drink. We just wanted to make sure there's no bad blood between us. I kept my expression neutral. No bad blood, I said softly. Just unfinished business. He chuckled uneasily. You and your dramatic phrases. You should really let this piano thing go. It's not healthy to hold grudges. I tilted my head. Oh, I've let go. Completely. They exchanged a quick, confused glance, but I didn't explain. Instead, I excused myself early, leaving them sitting there in their false comfort. I could almost hear the ticking clock counting down to the day they'd realize what I had done. Back home, I emailed Mr. Reeves a scanned copy of every forged document Lara had provided and the conversation logs showing Troy's admission about the piano. Within minutes, he replied with a single line. It's airtight, they won't see it coming. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. My thoughts played like overlapping melodies, my grandmother's laughter, the echo of piano keys, the sound of my brother's voice dripping with arrogance. It all blended into one haunting symphony that built toward a crescendo I could almost feel approaching. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, I knew there was no turning back. Over the next few weeks, I followed Mr. Reeves's advice. Stay quiet, act normal. I even sent friendly texts to Troy now and then, letting him believe I had moved on. Nadine posted photos online of her new boutique renovations, paid for, no doubt, by stolen estate funds. I saved every post as evidence. Then, one morning, I got the email from Mr. Reeves that made my heart leap. Subject, court date confirmed. Body, your grandmother's voice will finally be heard again. Prepare yourself, Selena. We're ready. The hearing was set for early spring, exactly 3 months after they'd sold my piano. 3 months to the day since they'd decided my memories were worth nothing. I walked to the empty corner of my living room again, where the sunlight fell across the floorboards. For a moment, I imagined the piano sitting there, gleaming under that light, and my grandmother smiling beside it. I'm doing this for you, I whispered. Not for the money, not for revenge, for respect. The silence around me was soft, but it felt like an answer, a calm note in a symphony that was building toward its final, powerful movement. But the next move I made would be the one they'd never recover from. Sometimes silence screams louder than any confrontation. In the weeks leading up to the court hearing, Life moved strangely like a quiet song right before the drums hit. I went to work, smiled at my students, paid my bills, and kept my voice calm even when my heart pulsed with anticipation. Outwardly, I was composed. Inside, I was counting down every second until justice arrived. Mr. Reeves had warned me not to stir suspicion. "The more ordinary you seem," he said, "the safer your case remains." So I became the picture of serenity. I even attended Sunday dinners again with Troy and Nadine, sitting at their dining table like nothing had ever happened. Every time Nadine served me food with that smug, unbothered smile, I smiled back sweetly, hiding the truth that her entire life was about to crumble. Laura noticed the change first. "You're different," she whispered one evening as we helped Nadine clear the dishes. "You're calmer." I gave her a small smile. "Maybe I'm just learning to let go." But letting go wasn't what I was doing. I was tightening the bowstring. Each day, I added another quiet layer to my plan. I organized my documents in pristine order: financial statements, proof of forgery, the voicemail of Troy bragging about selling the piano. I even found an email Nadine had sent to a supplier, boasting about her new windfall from the estate sale. I printed everything, hole-punched it neatly, and slipped it into a binder labeled Evelyn's Legacy. Mr. Reeves and I met every Friday afternoon to go over updates. His office became my second home: paperwork, legal codes, procedural notes spread across the mahogany table like pieces of a complicated score. He looked up from his notes one evening and said, "You're remarkably composed for someone preparing to expose her family." I smiled faintly. I learned composure from my grandmother. She always said anger makes you sloppy, but calmness cuts cleaner. He nodded approvingly. "Then I'd say you're ready." When I got home that night, I found a voicemail from Troy waiting for me. "Hey sis. Haven't heard from you in a while. Hope everything's good. Oh, and we might need to talk about some estate paperwork soon. Some bank stuff came up. Give me a call." I deleted it without replying. It wasn't guilt calling him, it was fear. Somewhere, deep down, he must have felt the floor shifting beneath his feet. A few days later, Nadine invited me to coffee. She was unusually polite, almost cautious. "I've been thinking, Selena," she said, stirring her drink. "We should all just move forward, you know? Family drama isn't worth ruining relationships." I sipped my cappuccino slowly before answering. "I couldn't agree more." She seemed relieved. "Good, because Troy was worried you might still be upset." I smiled, genuinely amused. "Upset? Oh, Nadine, I'm way past that." She laughed lightly, clearly not understanding what I meant. I didn't elaborate, there was no need. Her confusion was its own kind of satisfaction. That night I called Laura. "How are things with Troy?" I asked. She hesitated. "Strange. He's been quiet lately, working on something, and he keeps locking himself in the office. I think he's hiding something." "Probably," I said softly. "Just stay out of it, Laura. Trust me." She didn't press me for details. She didn't need to. There was a steadiness in my voice that told her I had a plan and that she'd see soon enough what it was. Meanwhile, I poured my energy back into music. Without my piano, I practiced on an old electric keyboard, the kind my students used. It wasn't the same, but the motion of my fingers brought me peace. Each scale, each chord, reminded me of Grandma's voice, steady, loving, wise. Even silence, she used to say, is part of the music, and that's what I was living through now, the silence before the symphony's crescendo. 2 weeks before the hearing, Mr. Reeves called to confirm that the court had received our full documentation packet. "The judge seems intrigued," he said. "It's not often we see such foresight in a testator. Your grandmother's moral clause was brilliantly written. They won't see it coming." "Good," I replied. "I want them to hear her voice one more time." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room, the air still and heavy with expectation. I looked at the space where the piano used to sit. It wasn't empty anymore, not in my mind. I could almost see Grandma sitting there, her gray hair tucked neatly behind her ears, smiling softly. You were right, I whispered. Truth really does play its own melody. The morning of the hearing arrived with crisp sunlight and a biting chill. I dressed carefully, black blazer, white blouse, simple gold earrings that had belonged to Grandma. I wanted to look composed, dignified, unshakable. Before leaving, I picked up a small, framed photo of her and tucked it into my bag. It felt like armor. When I stepped outside, the sky was pale blue and cloudless, a deceptive calm. I could almost feel the world holding its breath. As I drove to the courthouse, my heart pounded, but not from fear. It was anticipation, the way a performer feels before walking on stage. For months, I'd rehearsed every detail, every response, every move. And now the curtain was finally about to rise. Inside the courthouse, everything smelled faintly of old paper and polished floors. Mr. Reeves met me in the hallway, his expression confident. You ready? He asked. I nodded. I've been ready since the day they sold that piano. He gave a faint, approving smile. Then let's make sure the world hears the truth. We entered the courtroom, and as I took my seat, I saw Troy and Nadine across the aisle. They looked composed, smug, but I could see the faint nervousness in Troy's hands as he straightened his tie. Nadine's smile was tight, brittle. They still thought this was some small dispute, something they could talk their way out of. They had no idea that Grandma's voice was about to echo louder than their lies ever could. The bailiff called the court to order, and I took a deep breath. This was it, the final moment before everything changed. The calm before the storm. As the judge entered and the room fell silent, I whispered to myself, "For you, Grandma." And oh, it was more than worth the wait. Courtrooms have their own kind of music, measured, tense, and final. The day I'd been waiting for had finally arrived. As I walked into the courthouse that morning, everything felt surreal. The marble floors glistened, the fluorescent lights hummed softly, and each step I took echoed through the hall like the slow beat of a drum leading me to the stage. Mr. Reeves walked beside me, calm and confident, his briefcase clutched in one hand. "Remember," he said quietly, "you don't need to speak much today. Just let the evidence play its tune." I nodded, adjusting the strap of my purse where Grandma's framed photo rested inside. "I'm ready." When the double doors opened, I saw Troy and Nadine already seated at their table, whispering to each other. Nadine wore a beige suit, her hair styled perfectly, her lips painted that same condescending shade of rose she always wore when she thought she was winning. Troy looked smug, his tie immaculate, posture straight, but there was a faint stiffness to his shoulders, a telltale sign of someone trying too hard to appear relaxed. Their lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Garrison, was flipping through a folder, occasionally smirking in our direction. I didn't care. They were actors playing confidence in a script they didn't understand. As the judge entered, everyone stood. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise, the court of probate is now in session." When we were seated, the judge, an older woman with stern eyes and a patient tone, began. "We are here to address the matter of the Bennett estate specifically, a petition to invoke the conditional will of the late Evelyn Bennett, filed by her granddaughter, Miss Selina Bennett." Troy shot me a cold look, his jaw tightening. Nadine leaned toward him and whispered, "Conditional will?" I kept my gaze forward, hands folded neatly on the table. Mr. Reeves stood. "Your Honor, we intend to prove that the respondents Mr. and Mrs. Troy Bennett have knowingly violated the stipulations of the late Mrs. Bennett's estate by selling a designated heirloom against her explicit wishes. Furthermore, we will show evidence of financial mismanagement and document forgery within the estate's trust." The judge nodded. "Proceed." What followed felt like a symphony composed for justice. Every piece of evidence, every statement, every small reveal hit like a perfectly timed note. Mr. Reeves began with the piano, the core of it all. He played the recording of Troy's voicemail where he bragged about selling it, then presented the sale receipt with both their signatures. He read aloud the section of Grandma's letter stating that the piano must remain with me for life. Troy's lawyer tried to object, claiming the letter wasn't legally binding, but Reeves was ready. He presented the conditional codicil, the second will signed, notarized, and dated. This, he said firmly, is not sentiment. It's law. The courtroom murmured. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Then came the next movement of the symphony, the financial records. Reeves handed over the statements I'd uncovered, each transaction neatly highlighted. As shown, $60,000 in estate funds were withdrawn under false pretenses, listed as maintenance for properties that did not exist. The funds were transferred into accounts controlled solely by Mr. Troy Bennett. Troy shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his confident facade beginning to crack. Nadine's face had gone pale. Reeves continued, presenting the documents Lara had given me, the ones they'd tricked her into signing. He held them up like a conductor's baton. These signatures were falsified with incorrect dates, giving the respondents unilateral control of shared accounts. Miss Lara Bennett's testimony confirms this was done under deception. Lara, seated quietly behind me, gave a small nod when called to confirm. Her voice trembled but steady. She said, "I didn't know what I was signing. Troy told me it was just tax paperwork." When Reeves finished, the room was silent. The only sound was the faint scratching of the judge's pen. Then it was the defense's turn. Mr. Garrison rose, feigning composure. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge some procedural errors may have occurred, these were misunderstandings, family miscommunications. My clients acted in good faith, believing they were managing the estate responsibly." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Good faith doesn't cover theft, forgery, or violation of will provisions, Mr. Garrison," he stammered. "With respect, Your Honor, the piano in question." She interrupted sharply. "The piano in question is not merely property, it is explicitly named in the testator's documents as a legacy piece. That alone is enough to trigger the conditional clause." I couldn't help it, I smiled, just slightly. When it was finally my turn to speak, Mr. Reeves signaled me forward. I stood and faced the judge. "Your Honor," I began softly. "My grandmother raised me to believe that music is about harmony, each note supporting the other. But what my brother did wasn't harmony. It was betrayal. He didn't just sell an instrument, he sold her voice, her memory, her trust. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because she deserves to be respected." The judge studied me for a long moment. "Thank you, Miss Bennett." After brief deliberation, she spoke. "The evidence presented leaves little room for interpretation. The court finds that the respondents, Troy and Nadine Bennett, acted in violation of the late Evelyn Bennett's estate terms. Therefore, under the conditional will, full control and ownership of the Bennett estate are hereby transferred to Miss Selina Bennett, effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Nadine's mouth fell open. Troy turned red, his composure collapsing entirely. "This is insane!" he shouted, slamming his hands on the table. "She manipulated everyone. This is a setup." The judge's gavel struck sharply. "Mr. Bennett, sit down. Any further outburst will result in contempt." I stayed silent, simply meeting his furious eyes with calm. He'd tried to take everything from me, and now, in one clean stroke, everything he'd stolen had been returned and more. The judge continued, "The court also recommends that the evidence of financial misconduct be forwarded to the district attorney's office for review. If fraud is confirmed, criminal proceedings may follow." The sound of that final sentence was like the closing chord of a long, powerful sonata. Complete. Irrevocable. As the session adjourned, Troy stormed out of the room, Nadine trailing behind, tears streaking her carefully made-up face. Lara touched my shoulder gently. "You did it," she whispered. I smiled faintly. "No. Grandma did." Outside the courthouse, the sun had begun to set, casting long, golden rays across the steps. Mr. Reeves shook my hand. "It's over," he said. "The estate is yours." I looked up at the fading light. "It's not over," I said quietly. "It's only the beginning." Because while the judgment was done, my brother and his wife hadn't faced the full consequences yet. Justice had spoken, but karma was still tuning her strings. But my revenge wasn't complete, not yet. They thought losing money was the worst thing that could happen until they lost their reputation. The courthouse doors swung shut behind me, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. The tension that had lived in my chest for so long began to fade, replaced by a steady, satisfying calm, the kind that only comes when truth finally wins. Mr. Reeves walked beside me down the courthouse steps, his briefcase swinging lightly at his side. "You handled yourself perfectly," he said. "Your grandmother would be proud." I smiled faintly. "She always said the right notes hit hardest when they're played softly," he chuckled. Then today was a masterpiece. As we parted ways, I turned to look back at the courthouse, its cold stone pillars, its wide glass doors reflecting the golden afternoon light. Justice had been served, but what came next wasn't about the law anymore. It was about what happens when the truth starts to ripple outward, touching everything and everyone it passes. And those ripples began fast. The very next day, word of the court ruling spread through town like wildfire. In small communities, news travels faster than wind, and scandal travels even faster. At first, it started as whispers. "Did you hear? Troy Bennett lost everything in court." Then, "They said he forged papers, can you believe that?" And finally, the truth crystallized into gossip that spread across every cafe, salon, and church bench. Troy's reputation as a financial consultant was obliterated overnight. Clients began calling his office, demanding explanations. A few even threatened to file complaints for mismanagement of their accounts. Within a week, the company he worked for placed him on indefinite suspension pending internal investigation. Nadine's downfall followed swiftly after. Her boutique, once the darling of local socialites, started to lose suppliers. Designers pulled their merchandise, and loyal customers began avoiding her store. The whispers grew sharper. Didn't she steal from her own family? How could anyone trust her with money after that? She tried to salvage her business with a sale event, posting bright, desperate flyers around town that read, "Rebuild and Renew." But no amount of markdowns could rebuild a ruined name. I didn't say a word to the public. I didn't need to. Truth had its own momentum now. Meanwhile, the estate transfer moved smoothly. Mr. Reeves handled every document meticulously, ensuring every property, account, and asset was re-registered under my name. It felt strange having so much when all I'd wanted was one piano and a little respect. But instead of guilt, I felt purpose. I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. Within a month, I founded the Evelyn Foundation for Music Education, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping children who couldn't afford instruments or lessons. Grandma's name was on every banner, every pamphlet, every recital program. Her love for music was alive again, and this time, it would never be sold, stolen, or silenced. Laura became my right hand in the foundation. She'd quit her office job and poured herself into the work with me, helping organize fundraisers, coordinate classes, and connect with schools. Watching her smile again, seeing her spirit revived was its own kind of healing. One afternoon, she hugged me unexpectedly. "You know," she said softly, "Grandma would have loved this. You turned all that pain into something beautiful." I smiled, a lump rising in my throat. She taught me that music heals. I just never realized it could heal this much. Still, despite the calm that had returned to my life, Troy and Nadine weren't done trying to reach me. First came the emails, long, rambling messages about forgiveness and family bonds. They tried to paint themselves as victims, claiming they didn't understand the will, that they'd made honest mistakes. I didn't reply. Then came the calls, first from Troy, then from unknown numbers that I knew were Nadine's doing. I blocked them all. When that didn't work, Troy showed up at my door one rainy evening, his face tired, his suit wrinkled. "Selena, please." He started as I opened the door only halfway. "We need to talk. I messed up, I know. But you can't just shut me out. We're family." I stared at him quietly, the rain pattering on the porch between us. "Family?" I said finally. "Family doesn't sell what isn't theirs and call it responsibility." He looked down, jaw clenched. "It was never supposed to go this far." Nadine pushed me. "Stop." I interrupted coldly. You both made choices, and you both have to live with them. He sighed heavily, his voice breaking slightly. You won, all right. Isn't that enough? For a moment, I just looked at him, my brother, the man who had once protected me, now standing small and hollow, stripped of his arrogance. This was never about winning, I said quietly. It was about making things right. He didn't reply. He just nodded, rain dripping from his hair, and turned to leave. As I closed the door behind him, I felt no triumph, only closure. Days later, Nadine tried her own approach. She sent a handwritten letter in a perfectly scented envelope. I recognized her elegant cursive right away. Selena, we all make mistakes when we're desperate. Please don't destroy us over something that can't be undone. We're sorry. I folded the letter neatly, slipped it into a drawer unread beyond that single paragraph. Apologies born of consequence, not conscience, were worth less than the paper they were written on. While they hid from public scrutiny, I focused on the foundation. Within 6 months, it had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We held free concerts for underprivileged kids, funded music scholarships, and even opened a small studio where local students could record their performances. Every child who touched those instruments carried a little piece of my grandmother's spirit with them. Sometimes, after everyone left for the day, I'd sit alone in the studio, close my eyes, and imagine Grandma sitting beside me. I could almost hear her voice. See, Selena, you didn't lose anything, you found something new. And she was right, I'd lost a piano but gained a legacy. Troy and Nadine faded quietly from public view. Rumor had it they sold their house and moved to a smaller town 2 hours away. Their names disappeared from social circles, and their reputations once untouchable became warnings whispered over coffee. Don't be like the Bennetts. For a long time, I thought that would be the end of it. But peace, it seemed, still had one more test waiting for me. Because no matter how much good I did, or how far I moved forward, one ache still lingered deep inside me, the loss of the piano itself. My grandmother's piano, her real voice, her real memory. Even though I had justice, even though I had peace, the music felt incomplete. But one unfinished note still haunted me. I had the money and the justice but not the music. It's strange how silence can be so loud. Even after everything, the trial, the victory, the foundation, I would come home at night and still feel that echoing absence in the corner of my living room. The place where Grandma's piano once stood had become a symbol of everything I'd lost and gained. The emptiness wasn't physical anymore, it was emotional. Every night, I'd stand there for a few minutes before bed, just staring at that empty space. I'd think about the soft sheen of the polished wood, the way the morning light used to dance across the ivory keys, the smell of cedar and age that filled the room when I lifted the lid. It wasn't just furniture, it was a soul I'd grown up with. Justice had given me peace, but not closure. Not yet. One Friday evening, as I was locking up the foundation's small office, Laura stopped by. She'd been organizing a recital for our scholarship students. And as she packed up sheet music, she looked at me curiously. You still think about it, don't you? I sighed, giving her a half smile. Every day. She tilted her head. Then maybe you should find it. Find what? The piano, she said simply. If it meant that much to Grandma and to you, why not try to get it back? You have the resources now, Selena. Maybe it's out there waiting for you. Her words lingered long after she left. That night, I sat at my desk with my laptop and a cup of tea, staring at a blank search bar. Part of me didn't want to look because what if it was gone forever? What if someone had gutted it, repainted it, turned it into a decoration instead of an instrument? But another part of me whispered, what if it's not? So I started searching. At first, I got nowhere. I scoured secondhand marketplaces, antique dealers, and piano resellers. Dozens of listings popped up: Yamahas, Steinways, Baldwins, but none that matched Grandma's old baby grand. Hers had a distinctive trait, a small engraved letter E under the music stand, carved by my grandfather for her 50th birthday. That little detail became my compass. Days turned into weeks, and I almost gave up when an old listing caught my eye on a collector's forum. It was a refurbished, 1,950 seconds, Baldwin Baby Grand, mahogany finish, ivory keys, small scratch under the right pedal. My heart pounded as I clicked the photos, and there it was, the faint E, right where it should be. I felt tears sting my eyes. "Oh my God." "Grandma," I whispered. The seller's name was Adrian Hall, a retired composer living 3 towns over. I emailed him immediately, explaining who I was and asking if the piano was still available. He replied the next morning, "Dear Selena, the piano you described is indeed in my possession. It came from an estate sale about a year ago. I've restored it to full condition. Would you like to come see it?" I could barely breathe as I typed back, "Yes, please." When I arrived at his home 2 days later, Adrian welcomed me with a gentle smile. He was in his 70s, tall and kind-eyed, the sort of man who carried decades of music in his posture. "You're the granddaughter, then," he said warmly, leading me into his music room. I always wondered about this piano's story. It seemed special. And then I saw it. The piano gleamed under soft sunlight streaming through the window. Its wood shone with a rich, dark luster. The ivory keys looked as perfect as they had the day Grandma first gifted it to me. My knees almost buckled as I walked closer, fingertips trembling. "She's beautiful," I whispered. Adrian nodded. "She has a soul, that one. I could feel it the first time I played her." I smiled through tears. She belonged to my grandmother. She taught me to play on this piano. It's the heart of my childhood. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I can see that. I'd planned to keep her, but I think she's been waiting to go home." He refused to take more than what he had paid, $3,000, the same amount Troy and Nadine had sold it for. I insisted on paying extra, but he only smiled and said, "No, child. Some instruments aren't bought, they're returned." When he helped me load it into the moving truck, I felt as though a piece of my life was falling back into place. The drive home was quiet, reverent almost. When the movers set it in its rightful place, that corner of my living room felt alive again. The light hit the wood just as it used to, and for the first time in a long time, my home felt whole. That night, I sat down at the piano, hesitating for a moment before pressing a key. The note rang clear and warm, resonating through the house like a sigh of relief. I played softly at first, a few scales, then one of Grandma's favorite waltzes. As I did, memories flooded back. Her laughter, her voice guiding my hands, the way she'd close her eyes and lose herself in sound. I played for hours, until my hands ached and tears blurred the keys. It felt as though she were there again, sitting beside me, humming along. When I finished, I rested my hands on the keys and whispered, "You're home." Over the next few days, that piano became the centerpiece of everything once more. Lara came by, smiling when she saw it. "You did it," she said softly. "You brought her back." I nodded, running a hand along the polished wood. "It feels like she never left." We decided to hold a small dedication at the foundation, a concert in Grandma's honor, with the restored piano as the star. My students would play, and I would close the night with one of her favorite compositions. It was more than an event, it was a full-circle moment. The music that had once been silenced by greed would now be reborn through love. But as I prepared for that concert, something unexpected happened. A week before the event, I received a plain envelope in the mail, no return address, just my name in block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a USB drive. The note read, "You should know what they planned." No signature, no hint of who sent it. I stared at it for a long time, the piano gleaming behind me in the afternoon light. I didn't know it yet, but that small envelope would open a door to a truth darker than anything I had uncovered before, one that would make everything that had happened so far feel like a prelude. I set the drive on my desk, unease curling in my stomach. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But deep down I knew I couldn't, because every melody, no matter how beautiful, hides a shadow in its silence. But what happened next turned my quiet victory into something legendary. Revenge had been mine, but justice wasn't finished playing. The envelope sat on my desk for 3 days before I found the courage to open the USB drive. Each night I'd glance at it from across the room while the piano seemed to watch me, its glossy surface reflecting the lamplight like an unspoken question. Part of me hoped it was nothing, maybe some leftover file from the estate case, but deep down, I knew it was something else, something heavier. On the third night, curiosity overpowered hesitation. I plugged the drive into my laptop, half expecting it to be empty. Instead, a folder popped up instantly, labeled, "For you to know." My stomach knotted. Inside were a dozen screenshots, scanned documents, and audio clips. The first file was a transcript of an email exchange between Troy and Nadine. I started reading, and with every line, my breath caught a little more. From Nadine Bennett to Troy Bennett subject, Mom's will. We can't let Selena control anything. She's too emotional. We need to convince Reeves that Evelyn wasn't of sound mind when she wrote that will. If we get him to file a mental capacity review, we can take over everything. I scrolled further, trembling. Troy. Already working on it, we'll need statements. Maybe from a doctor. I'll talk to that old neighbor of hers, maybe he can say she was getting forgetful. My throat tightened. They'd planned to declare Grandma incompetent. They hadn't just stolen from her, they'd tried to erase her dignity. The next file was a recording, poor quality, but unmistakable. Troy's voice. We have to move fast before she catches on. Reeves won't suspect anything if we act normal. Nadine's voice. And what about the piano? She'll freak if she finds out. Troy. Then we'll just say it was for taxes. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late. I slammed my laptop shut and just sat there, shaking. Even after everything, I hadn't realized how deep their deceit ran. This wasn't thoughtless greed, it was premeditated betrayal. A slow, deliberate plan to steal not just money, but legacy, identity, and memory. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to wake from the nightmare that had just reopened. But instead, I took a deep breath. I thought of Grandma, of her patience, her grace under pressure. Never let rage ruin your rhythm, she used to say. Anger can play the wrong notes if you're not careful. So I calmed myself and called Mr. Reeves the next morning. When he answered, I told him about the envelope and forwarded everything immediately. He listened in silence as I described the contents. Then he said, Galena, I don't know who sent that to you. But if those communications are authentic, this is no longer just a civil matter. This is criminal conspiracy. Can you verify them? I asked. I'll have them examined today, he said. And if they check out, I'll deliver everything to the district attorney personally. It took less than 48 hours for him to confirm what I already knew: they were real. Every word, every plan, every attempt to rewrite Grandma's history had been preserved like a stain waiting to be revealed. Reeves called again. I've already spoken to the DA's office. They're opening a formal investigation into attempted estate fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. You may be contacted as a witness. I sat quietly, processing. Do you think they'll actually face charges? Given the evidence, he said firmly. Yes, I do. That evening, I walked to the piano, pressing one soft note that rang through the quiet house. For months, my story had been about reclaiming what was lost, but now it had become about protecting the truth itself. My revenge had been personal. This was moral. 2 weeks later, I was called into the district attorney's office to give a statement. The investigator, a woman named Detective Rena Carter, treated me with a mix of sympathy and professionalism. These emails are damning, she said, flipping through printed copies. They didn't just try to manipulate the estate, they plotted to defame your grandmother while she was alive. Hearing it out loud made me feel sick. She trusted them, I said softly. And they were planning to call her unstable. Detective Carter nodded grimly. That kind of greed eats through families like acid. You're lucky she was as careful as she was. After my interview, I left the office feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter because justice was still moving forward. Heavier because no matter what happened next, I couldn't unhear those words. The news reached Troy and Nadine soon after. I didn't have to see them to know the small-town rumor mill carried the story faster than any official announcement could. People whispered about indictments, about the Bennetts being investigated for fraud. A week later, I got a single text from Troy. "You couldn't just leave it alone, could you?" I didn't reply. I deleted it, just like I deleted all the others. Instead, I poured myself into the upcoming concert, the Foundation's first major event. If the law was justice, then music would be my healing. We were dedicating the evening to Grandma Evelyn, and I planned to play the same piece she'd taught me when I was 6, Claire de Lune. On the night of the concert, the hall was filled to the brim, students, parents, donors, even a few old family friends. The piano gleamed under the stage lights, freshly polished, glowing like something divine. When it was my turn to perform, I stepped onto the stage, heart pounding. I sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. The notes flowed like tears, soft, luminous, full of memory. Every key I pressed felt like an act of release. Every melody a quiet reclaiming of peace. By the final chord, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken. I was free. As the applause swelled, I looked toward the empty seat in the front row where Grandma used to sit at my recitals. I could almost see her there, smiling through the glow of the lights. After the concert, Detective Carter called to update me. "The DA's office has filed preliminary charges," she said. "It'll take time, but the process is underway. They'll have to answer for what they did." I thanked her quietly, my eyes fixed on the piano. Then the music can finally rest. That night, I stayed in the hall long after everyone left, sitting at the piano under the dim lights. I pressed one final note, soft, pure, unwavering. Justice had found its melody, but karma had one last encore. When greed consumes you, it doesn't stop at the surface, it eats your soul. The investigation didn't take long to gain momentum. Within weeks, the DA's office formally announced that Troy and Nadine Bennett were under review for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to manipulate an estate. The local news picked up the story almost immediately. For a town as small as ours, it became front-page material overnight. The headline read, "Siblings under fire for estate fraud. Bennett family scandal deepens." When I saw it, I didn't smile. I just stared at the paper for a long time, feeling that strange mixture of sadness and inevitability. This wasn't joy, it was justice doing what it always does, eventually catching up. I didn't need to imagine how Troy and Nadine reacted. The phone calls from Lara told me everything. "Troy's been a wreck," she said one evening, her voice shaking. "He's angry at everyone, at you. At the court. Even at himself. Nadine barely leaves the house. She keeps saying this isn't fair." "Fair?" I repeated softly. "Grandma gave them love, trust, and family. They sold it for money. Fairness left the room a long time ago." Lara didn't argue. She just sighed. "I think he's starting to realize what he's done." But it was too late for realizations. Within a month, the court had frozen their assets while the investigation continued. Their accounts were audited, their emails subpoenaed, and their names dragged through the public record. Nadine's boutique officially closed its doors after suppliers withdrew completely. A bright "For Lease" sign replaced the elegant gold letters that once spelled Nadine's fine attire. As for Troy, his suspension turned into termination. His company released a statement distancing themselves from his actions, citing ethical concerns. His clients, many of whom had trusted him with their savings, cut ties immediately. The empire of control and pride they had built came tumbling down brick by brick. I should have felt triumphant. But when Lara came over one evening, her eyes puffy from crying, I realized revenge had its own weight. "They're breaking apart," she said, curling her hands around a cup of tea. "They fight every day." Troy blames Nadine for the emails, and Nadine says she only did what he told her. "They're barely speaking." I looked down at my piano keys, the reflection of the lamp shimmering across them. They made their choices. They broke something sacred, and now it's breaking them. Lara nodded quietly. "I know. But they're still family." Her words hung in the air, heavy but true. I didn't respond right away. Family, how strange that one word could hold both love and betrayal at once. The following week, Mr. Reeves called to tell me the results of the financial audit. The numbers confirm everything, he said. They siphoned over $80,000 in total. The DA's office is recommending restitution and probation, possibly even community service depending on the plea deal. Probation? I echoed, half in disbelief. That's it? For first-time offenders who cooperate? It's not unusual, he explained. They'll lose nearly everything they own, Selena. In many ways, that's a heavier punishment than jail. He wasn't wrong. I'd already seen what guilt and exposure could do to people like them. The sentencing came a few months later. The courtroom felt smaller this time, quieter, like everyone already knew the ending of this story. Troy sat beside Nadine, both dressed plainly, stripped of their earlier arrogance. They looked older, defeated. When the judge asked if they had anything to say before sentencing, Troy spoke first. His voice was low, shaky. I don't have an excuse. I was greedy. I thought I was doing what was best for the family, but I was lying to myself. I'm sorry. Nadine followed, her voice trembling. I never meant to hurt anyone. I thought we could fix everything if we had more control. The judge's gaze was firm but not cruel. Control taken by deceit is not control, it's corruption. Consider this a lesson you've bought at a very high price. They were sentenced to 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and full financial restitution to the foundation in my grandmother's name. When the judge mentioned the foundation, Nadine broke down in tears. I didn't move. I simply watched, remembering the woman who once told me that my grandmother's piano was just an old thing. After the hearing, Laura and I walked out together. She was quiet until we reached the parking lot. Do you hate them? She asked softly. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. No, I said finally. I pity them. Hate keeps you tied to the past. Pity lets you move forward. That night, I sat at my piano again, running my fingers over the keys. The sound that filled the room was neither sad nor joyful, it was balanced, like breathing. Weeks passed, and life began to find rhythm again. The Evelyn Foundation flourished, with more students enrolling than ever. Music echoed through the halls daily, laughter spilling from practice rooms. Sometimes, when the children played, I could almost hear Grandma's voice blending with theirs, warm and eternal. Troy and Nadine stayed out of sight. Word spread that they'd sold their house and moved to a small apartment on the edge of town. Occasionally, Laura would mention seeing Troy at the grocery store, or hearing that Nadine volunteered at the library for her community service. I never asked for details, some things were better left distant. One rainy afternoon, though, as I was closing the foundation, I found an envelope slipped under the door. No stamp, no address, just my name written in familiar handwriting. It was from Troy. Inside was a single page. His words were short, written in a shaky hand. Selena, you were right about everything. I lost sight of what mattered. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I've started taking music lessons. I remember how much Grandma loved hearing you play. I thought maybe learning could help me understand her, maybe even you. I'm sorry, for all of it. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the piano bench beside Grandma's original note. Somehow, it felt right to keep them together, the beginning and the end of the same story. Later that night, I played softly, the rain tapping against the windows like applause from another world. I thought about everything that had happened, the loss, the betrayal, the justice, the healing. It struck me that this entire story wasn't just revenge, it was restoration. And as I pressed the final key, the note lingered longer than usual, pure and unwavering. Until the will revealed one more secret that changed everything again. She had one last lesson for all of us. Months passed after Troy and Nadine's sentencing, and slowly, life began to hum with a softer rhythm. The chaos had settled. The foundation was thriving. Children's laughter and piano notes filled my days, and peace filled my nights. But peace has a way of revealing what's still hidden beneath the quiet. One crisp autumn morning, I received a call from Mr. Reeves. His tone was calm but laced with something new, something almost tender. "Selena," he said, "could you come by my office this afternoon? There's something of your grandmother's I've been meaning to give you. It's personal." My pulse quickened. Something of hers? I thought I had everything. He chuckled softly. "Your grandmother was full of surprises." When I arrived later that day, his office felt different, warmer somehow. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, glinting off the brass plaques and old law books that lined the shelves. Mr. Reeves stood and handed me a small, sealed envelope. The handwriting on the front stopped me cold. It was hers. Grandma Evelyn's looping cursive, elegant and unmistakable. On the envelope, she'd written, "For Selena only when truth has spoken." My throat tightened. "You waited until now?" I whispered. He nodded. "She left it with instructions. I was to give it to you only after the estate had been fully settled and any disputes resolved. She wanted you to have this when your heart was clear." I turned the envelope over, my hands trembling slightly. The wax seal had the same floral imprint she used on all her letters. It felt like time folding back in on itself. "Thank you," I said softly. I didn't open it there. I couldn't. The letter felt sacred, like something meant to be read in private. So I drove straight home, walked into my living room, and sat down at the piano. The late afternoon light poured through the window, golden and gentle. It touched the wood just the way it had when she played. For a long moment, I just stared at the letter, tracing her name with my finger. Then, slowly, I broke the seal. Inside were 2 sheets of stationery. Her handwriting neat and steady despite the faint shakiness of age. "My dearest Selena, if you're reading this, then truth has finally done what it was meant to do. I knew, long before my time came, that love and legacy can twist when greed enters the heart. But I also knew you, with your gentle hands and fierce heart. You would protect not just my things, but my spirit." Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. I took a deep breath and kept reading. "I saw the way you played that piano, how you poured your soul into every note. You reminded me of myself, how music was both my strength and my refuge. That piano was never just an instrument. It carried the heartbeat of our family. It was where I played when I fell in love, where I grieved when I lost, and where I found peace when life became too loud. I knew one day it might test your strength. But I also knew you would find your way back to it." My hands shook as I turned to the second page. "By now, you've discovered the conditional will. I created it not to divide my family, but to reveal them. Truth has a way of showing people who they really are when no one is watching. I hoped the pain of consequence would one day lead them to reflection and maybe even redemption. Selena, don't let their mistakes harden your heart. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means freeing yourself from their weight." My chest tightened as the ink blurred beneath my tears. I also left one final gift. In the foundation documents, Mr. Reeves will help you locate an unregistered fund in Lara's name, her music scholarship. She doesn't know about it. I want you to administer it quietly. She has a gentle soul, easily overshadowed by others, but her kindness is her greatest instrument. Help her use it." I set the letter down, covering my mouth as I tried to hold back sobs. It was exactly like her planning for peace even from beyond the grave. She hadn't just written a will, she'd composed a symphony of morality, trust, and love that continued to play long after she was gone. When I finally calmed down, I called Mr. Reeves again. His voice softened when he heard me sniffle. "I take it you've read it?" I laughed quietly through tears. "Yes. She really thought of everything. Didn't she?" He smiled on the other end. "That she did. I have the paperwork for Lara's fund ready whenever you are." The next day, I invited Lara over. She arrived with her usual warmth, unaware of what I had planned. Over tea, I told her about the letter, well, parts of it. The fund, Grandma's words about her spirit. The tears in Lara's eyes came instantly. She really did that for me?" she whispered. "She did," I said softly. "And I think she knew how much this would mean to you." Lara hugged me so tightly I could hardly breathe. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, I whispered back. Just make sure her music never fades. That evening, we drove to the foundation together and added a new plaque by the entrance. It read, "The Evelyn Bennett Scholarship for Kindness and Artistry, a Legacy of Grace." When we unveiled it, something shifted in me. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt completely at peace. Revenge had burned through me, justice had cleansed me, but this was healing. Later that night, I returned home alone and sat at the piano once more. The letter lay beside me, her words still glowing under the lamp. I began to play one of her favorite songs, Moon River, slowly, gently, letting every note carry the weight of gratitude. As I played, I could almost see her there beside me again. Her hands on mine, her soft smile reflected in the polished wood. When the song ended, I whispered, "You were right, Grandma. Forgiveness really is the final verse." I folded her letter carefully and placed it in the piano bench next to Troy's note, the two sides of our family's story, forever linked. As I turned off the lamp, the room glowed in soft moonlight. The air was still, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of echoes, of love, of music that would never fade. I told myself it was the end of the story, but it felt more like the start of something new. The night I played again, it wasn't for me, it was for her. 6 months after finding Grandma's final letter, life had found its rhythm again. The Evelyn Foundation had grown beyond what I ever imagined: music classes, 6 days a week, scholarships awarded quarterly, and a waiting list full of eager young musicians. Lara handled the administrative side with quiet efficiency while I focused on teaching and mentoring. The air inside the foundation always hummed with life, laughter, and the faint echo of piano scales in every room. But amid the joy and the progress, I kept feeling a gentle tug, a calling to do something more, something bigger. Grandma's spirit had guided me through everything, and I knew deep down that I needed to honor her in a way that truly captured her soul. One evening, after a long day of lessons, I sat at the piano alone in the recital hall. The building was dark except for the faint amber glow from the stage lights. My fingers drifted across the keys without thinking, playing fragments of melodies she used to love. As the last chord faded, an idea sparked in my mind so clearly it made me gasp. A concert. Not just a recital or a fundraiser, a full tribute concert to celebrate Grandma's life, music, and legacy. It would be the first major event hosted by the foundation, featuring my students, local musicians, and me. The restored piano would take center stage, under the same soft lights where Grandma once played decades ago. The next morning, I told Lara about it. Her eyes lit up immediately. "Yes," she said. "A dedication concert. We could call it a symphony for Evelyn." I smiled. "Perfect." Planning began instantly. Word spread fast, and soon the entire town was buzzing with excitement. The same people who once whispered about the Bennett family scandal now came forward to offer help, donations, and even decorations. It felt poetic how the same community that had witnessed our division was now gathering for something built on unity and love. Over the next month, the foundation transformed into a flurry of preparation. Students practiced tirelessly, volunteers arranged programs, and I spent every free moment perfecting my set list. I decided I would perform 3 pieces: Claire de Lune, Grandma's favorite lullaby, and an original composition I'd written just for her, Evelyn's Promise. It was the first piece I'd written since the ordeal ended, and every note carried a story, of betrayal and healing, of silence and song, of legacy and forgiveness. The night of the concert arrived in late spring. The air was warm and fragrant with blooming magnolias outside the hall. As people began to fill the seats, I peeked from behind the stage curtain, my heart racing. The auditorium was packed: students, families, donors, even old friends of Grandma's who hadn't set foot in town for years. And then I saw her portrait, framed beautifully at the front of the hall beside the piano. Grandma's kind eyes seemed to look right at me, that familiar spark of pride shining even through glass. Lara stood beside me backstage, her hand on my shoulder. "She'd be so proud of you, Selena," she whispered. I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Let's make her proud together. The lights dimmed, and the concert began. The children played. First, tiny fingers pressing keys with courage and innocence. Their performances weren't perfect, but they were pure. Each wrong note carried love, and each right one carried joy. The audience applauded them warmly, some wiping tears as they watched the next generation carry on the legacy. Then came the duets, the choir performances, and the violin ensemble. Every sound, every harmony felt like it belonged to something bigger than any of us. Finally, it was my turn. Lara introduced me, her voice steady but emotional. Our final performance tonight comes from the woman whose strength and grace made all of this possible. Please welcome our founder, Miss Selena Bennett. The applause was thunderous. As I stepped into the spotlight, the room fell silent. The piano waited under the soft golden lights, gleaming as if it had been waiting for this moment too. I sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first song was Clair de Lune. The gentle waves of notes filled the room like moonlight on water. My hands didn't tremble. They moved with purpose, confidence, and love. The melody seemed to carry Grandma's laughter through the hall, light and graceful. Then I played her lullaby, the one she used to hum to me as a child. I could almost hear her whispering the lyrics, her voice weaving between the notes. Rest now, little melody. Tomorrow's song will find you. And then came Evelyn's promise. From the first chord, I knew this was it, the true end and beginning of everything. The music rose slowly, built through pain, forgiveness, and triumph. It spoke without words of all we had endured, the loss, the justice, the healing. I could feel every person in the room listening, really listening, as if they too had something inside them finally letting go. As I played the final note, the silence that followed was deep and sacred. For a few long seconds, no one moved. Then the applause erupted, a roar of emotion that shook the hall. I stood, bowing, tears streaming freely down my face. And as I looked toward Grandma's portrait, I swear I saw her smiling, the same proud, loving smile that had guided me my whole life. After the concert, people came to congratulate me, to thank me, to share how deeply moved they were. But what touched me most was seeing my students, their little faces shining with joy and awe. They weren't just learning music. They were learning legacy. Lara hugged me tightly. You did it, she whispered, her voice cracking. You brought her back. I smiled through tears. No, I said softly. She never left. That night, after everyone had gone, I stayed behind in the empty hall. The air was still heavy with the warmth of applause. I sat at the piano once more and played a soft reprise of Evelyn's promise. The echo filled the space, lingering like a gentle ghost of music and memory. When the last note faded, I whispered into the quiet, "This is for you, Grandma." Every note, every breath, every heartbeat. I closed the lid of the piano slowly, resting my hand on it. For the first time in years, there was no ache, no anger, no unfinished chord left inside me. Only peace. The concert had done more than honor her, it had freed me. But my story didn't end with music, it began again with peace. When you lose something you love, you don't just fight for it, you become it. It's been a full year since that night, since the Foundation's first concert, since the applause that felt like it came from heaven itself. And in that year, I've learned that peace isn't quiet. It's not the absence of sound or conflict. Peace hums softly, like the low resonance of a piano string after the last note fades. It lingers, wrapping around you, reminding you that the storm has passed but the music remains. The Evelyn Foundation has become my life's greatest work. What began as an act of healing grew into a movement that changed lives. We now teach over 200 children across 3 nearby towns, with traveling instructors who bring music to schools that can't afford arts programs. Each time I visit one of those classes and see a child's eyes light up when they play their first clear note, I feel Grandma's spirit there, alive, steady, proud. Lara and I co-direct the foundation together. It's funny to think how far we've come. A year ago, our family name was tainted with scandal. Now it's printed on banners, concert programs, and local magazines as a symbol of resilience and hope. Lara has grown into her role beautifully confident, compassionate, and wise. Sometimes I catch her smiling at the scholarship plaque, the one that reads, "The Evelyn Bennett Scholarship for Kindness and Artistry." Every time she touches it, I see a glimmer of Grandma's kindness shining through her. As for me, I still teach. I still play. I still find new ways to bring Grandma's lessons into every room, every melody. On quiet afternoons, I sit in the main hall, listening to my students practice. Some stumble over wrong notes, others find perfect rhythm. But all of them try again, and that's what she would have loved most. At home, my piano has reclaimed its throne by the window. I make it a ritual to play at least once a day, even if it's only for a few minutes before bed. Sometimes I start with Clair de Lune, sometimes with Grandma's lullaby, and sometimes I just let my fingers wander into new melodies. The house no longer feels haunted by silence. It feels alive, warm, forgiving, full. A few months after the concert, I received another letter from Troy. Unlike the last one, it wasn't an apology, it was an update. Dear Selena, I've finished my community service. I've started teaching beginner music theory at the local youth center. The irony isn't lost on me. But it's helping. I understand now what Grandma saw in it. Thank you for not destroying me completely. I didn't deserve mercy, but you gave it anyway. I'm trying to be better. When I finished reading it, I didn't cry. I just smiled and placed it alongside the others. Grandma's letter, Lara's scholarship documents, and that very first note that started it all. They were the physical embodiment of everything I'd learned. That life, like music, is built on tension and release, conflict and resolution. Forgiveness had become my final act of revenge, not through words, but through living well, through building something beautiful out of what they tried to break. Even Nadine wrote once. Her letter was shorter, but sincere. I'm sorry. You were right, it wasn't just a piano. It was love, and I was too blind to see it. I didn't write back, but I wished her peace. From afar, I heard she'd started working at a community thrift shop, living quietly. Maybe humility had finally tuned her soul. Life moved on, and so did I. One spring evening, just after sunset, Lara and I hosted the Foundation's second annual concert. This time, I didn't play. I sat in the audience, watching my students perform the pieces I'd once struggled to master. The sound of their music filled the hall like sunlight through stained glass, colorful, fractured but whole. When the final song ended, they presented me with something unexpected, a framed dedication. It read, "For Selena Bennett, who turned loss into legacy, and pain into purpose. Your music taught us more than notes, it taught us how to live." I couldn't speak. Tears streamed down my face as they surrounded me, cheering and laughing, their little hands tugging at my arms. I realized, in that moment, that Grandma's gift had multiplied 100-fold. Her piano hadn't just survived, it had become the foundation for countless stories, countless melodies yet to be written. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stayed behind once again. The stage was empty, the lights dim, and the faint echo of laughter lingered in the air. I walked up to the piano, brushed my fingers across the keys, and smiled. "Look what we built," I whispered. I began to play softly, not for the audience, not for applause, but for her. The melody was slow and peaceful, weaving between past and present, love and forgiveness. I closed my eyes and imagined Grandma sitting beside me, her gentle hand resting on mine, her voice saying, "See, darling, every song ends, but the music never truly stops." And she was right. Because even after everything, the betrayal, the courtroom battles, the sleepless nights, the victories and losses, life continued to hum. The harmony we once lost had found its way back to us, richer than before. The foundation grew, the students flourished, and Lara found her own love, a kind man who adored her passion for music. They planned to marry next spring, and she asked me to play during the ceremony. When she told me, I laughed through tears and said, "Of course, Grandma wouldn't have it any other way." Everywhere I look now, I see traces of her. In the smiles of children pressing piano keys for the first time. In the sunbeams glinting off the polished wood. In the echo of every song that drifts through the foundation's halls. She's not gone. She's part of every note that's ever played there. As I write this, the evening light is softening across my living room. The piano gleams quietly beside me. I can hear the faint laughter of children playing outside, their joy carrying through the open window. I place my hand on the keys and press one note clear, bright, endless. It's the sound of everything coming full circle. Because I am not just her granddaughter anymore. I am her echo, her student, her legacy. I am the music she left behind. And when the last note fades, all that's left is peace.